This is a saltwater fly that is part of the selection that's going to be used um, for the silver fly tying award, and it's the Lefty's Deceiver, a fly that works equally well in saltwater as well as freshwater. Gretchen, what kind of materials do we have?
Well, first of all, we've got a saltwater hook in there, size 2, I believe.
Okay, well that's what I'm working on. And I've also, one of the things they're going to request that we do, I've pinched down the barb and I've mounted it in the vise.
And then he's tying a jam knot, starting at one, starting and going back close to the bend.
Right.
And he's using white thread.
And I'm going to wrap back to a position that leaves me hanging in the middle of the point section of the hook, and that's from the point of the barb to the point of the hook. And so right about where it's hanging now is what is.
And also he has prepared 6 white and 2 grizzly rooster feathers. I don't know, feathers, it doesn't have to be rooster feathers, for the body. And you'll also need 5 strands of crystal flash.
That's the crystal flash that I'll be using.
In white and brown bucktail.
And I'll just use a bucktail, and it's white on one side and it's the natural color on the other side.
Okay, that takes care of the body. Then that's quite a bit of material for a body. So then we go to the throat, which is 10 strands of red crystal flash.
And instead of crystal flash, we're going to use Flashaboo because we don't have the crystal flash, but it will work just fine.
And then the head will be made out of white thread and eyes and head cement. And the eyes we're using are stick-on eyes.
You know, these are stick-on doll eyes. They're dimensional, just like requested in the recipe, but ours have movable pupils rather than fixed pupils. But they're stick-on eyes that will put into place.
And then, of course, you'll need some cement to complete the head.
Correct. Where we're at right at the moment is I've already applied a thread base starting forward of the point of the hook, but back on the shank, and I've wrapped to that position that's in the center of the distance between the point of the hook and the point of the barb.
Okay, so the feathers are adjusted so the tips are even, and each of the 3 feathers are fixed so they curve the same way, and then they're put together. And so we can tie them from the bare stem area that he's prepared.
Okay, and now that we're going to do that, I'm going to move the camera so that we have room on camera to actually place the feathers.
Okay, while holding the feathers assembly between your fingers, you can lay them on the hook shank. Adjust them on the top, just for length.
One that doesn't want to behave itself. Okay, there we go. One of the things when you're tying multiples on like this, they have a tendency to want to go crazy on you. And I found that if you'll put a couple of soft turns to hold them in place and then put tight turns over the top of the soft turns, it kind of helps do that. But anyway, so
yeah, you can kind of adjust those for position by adjusting the butts of the feathers or kind of playing with them.
Yeah.
And then you can trim the stems. And
I broke the thread in the last segment right towards the end there, so I've got everything back in order, and the thread is reattached to the hook right now. What do we do now, Gretch?
Okay, now you need to select 5 strands of crystal flash, about twice the length that you need.
Okay, I've got some of those right now. Let me tie them on.
Yeah, tie them on the near side with some hanging forward.
Yep,
about half of it hanging forward.
Yeah, and then we'll pull them back over and put them on the other side, right?
Right.
Okay.
Then after you do that, what you want to do is wrap the thread to the eye with those touching turns, and then go clear to the eye, and then go back about 2 eye widths back towards the bend.
Alrighty, now we'll go back to 2 eyelids. We need enough space to put the eyes and all that kind of stuff and tie everything else on.
The crystal flash ends should be cut at varying lengths with the longest just short of the hackle tips.
Well, let me just kind of spread them apart a little bit and trim them at a severe angle. That way that'll make them all different lengths. There we go. Well, now that we've advanced the thread forward and then back 2 eye widths, it's probably about time to put on the bucktail for the wings, or the whatever you call the front part of the fly.
Yeah, you need a sparse bunch of white bucktail to start with, because we're going to tie this in 2 bunches. And so you want to even the tips, generally hand stacking it, which I think you've already done in your fingers. So
Right.
you don't have to, you're not wanting them exactly the same, but kind of similar.
Yeah, so you don't have any wild crazy ones sticking all the way out there.
And then we're going to pre-glue and cut it just like we did on the previous fly.
All right, well, let me measure it for length and cut it off. And get off camera to do that so I don't end up with...
You're going to leave about 2 eye lengths for your tie over section.
Okay. Now I'll just
Now
go
this
ahead.
first batch goes on the near side.
All right, that's what we'll do.
Now we're going to do exactly the same thing with another bunch for the far side.
Okay.
Okay, we've got this second batch of sparse bucktail that Al has hand
Now I'm going to
stacked.
measure it on the near side for length so that I can get it cut right.
You can cut it and pre-glue it.
And now let me reposition my vise just a little bit so I can better see that other side. And now it's time to pre-glue the application. All right, there.
That's good. Now see how that kind of forms a V?
Yeah.
That's the way it's supposed to be. And now we're going to cut some gray or brown. In this case, we're going to use the brown bucktail.
Okay, off camera, I took a moment and hand stacked some brown, and I'm going to kind of measure that for length and get ready to cut that and put the glue on it. And we'll tie that into place.
Real proud you haven't glued your fingers together yet.
Yeah, I'm sure that Jim Ferguson had that in mind when he came up with the instructions on this, but that's all right. We'll get her done. Okay, now it's going to take a little bit to build up a nice big thread head, so I'm going to do that off camera so that we're ready to mount the eyes. Oh, in fact, we have one other thing to do before the eyes,
Yeah,
don't
we need to tie in 10 strands of red flash here. We're going to use Flashaboo because we didn't have the crystal flash. And this is the throat.
Okay, that's right. I forgot about that part.
Yeah.
Let me get out a clump of that, and we'll be back on camera in just a moment. And now I'm going to add in the throat sparkle. We're going to use Flashaboo instead of the crystal flash. However, if you've got the crystal flash, please use that on your flies for evaluation. But an acceptable substitute is Flashaboo. Let me get that exactly on the underside there. Now I'll just kind of wrap it into place, keeping it on the underside. Now let me pull that back so I can wrap it into place there.
You know, he's covering up all the butts and shaping a head. Take a few wraps to get that head the way you want
And
it.
what length do I want to trim the throat so I can get it out of my way? It's kind of getting to be a pain in the neck. Well, I'll cut it to a throat, and a throat usually doesn't go any longer than the point of the hook.
It really doesn't say, but it
You know,
Yeah, looks
we'll
like
just-
it's about halfway back to the
yeah,
point.
and that's what we'll do right there. Now I'm going to go off camera for a few minutes to build up a good thread head, because watching me put thread on the hook is just about like watching paint dry. Just a moment. I've taken a moment to wrap a thread head, and the instructions say to finish at the back of the head and then to whip finish forward, and that's what we're going to do right now.
And then we're going to seal that with some head cement.
Right, let me lay that down and get some head cement here. And they're going to let that set up and dry. It'll take about a few minutes, and then we'll be back to put the eyes on. Well, here the eyes are in place, and I have to admit we did try crazy glue to put them on, and I glued my fingers, so Jim won out after all. And so we've been off camera for a while getting my fingers unglued, and now Gretchen came up with an idea of getting them in place well enough to be able to make the last application, and that was to use a glue stick. Worked quite well putting those in place. Now they're not dry yet. We're going to go off camera, and as soon as they're dry, we're going to apply a coating of epoxy to finish them off and hold the eyes in place. But there's the completed fly. We'll show you the completed fly in just a moment after the clear cure glue and the epoxy is in place, and do an evaluation on it. Now that we have the epoxy in place around the eyes, and as you can see that's completed, and that epoxy also, that coating will keep it in place pretty good. But let's go ahead and do an evaluation on this fly.
Okay, overall appearance and proportions, and then of course the consistency is the other thing.
So it'd be consistency with the other flies that you send. I've got one droopy grizzly, which is going to make the offside of my body is going to be a dinger, because it just doesn't want to stay in place. It wants to droop, so I got a feather that's not shaped real well. However, the rest of it seems to be okay. It's really tough to identify proportions on a fly like this, so we're going to say that it's consistent with its neighbors, and we'll go from there. It's
Material selection?
what's that?
Material selection?
Material selection. Our material selection is what I would say pretty much right on, with the exception that we used Flashaboo instead of Crystal Flash on the throat, though I don't think that makes any difference. It still makes a nice red flashy area right there where it's supposed to be on the fly. The rest of it appears to me be good. The eyes are in place, so they're different than the eyes that were used in the demonstration in the book. But all in all, I would mark down for the tail. And if anything, I think the bulk of the hair may be a little too much, and I might knock a half a point off for the little too much bulk in the hair. Other than that, this fly is one of the more difficult ones, at least for me, to evaluate. I would just have to see how close it is in consistency to the other two that would be sent to the evaluator, if I were the evaluator. You see anything that you would want to say,
No,
Gretchen?
looks good to me.
All right, good.